Logan the Layman Critic here. Um, so this is a video that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and I've actually it's been a couple different types of videos that I've been considering, and I could never figure out which I wanted to do, so I'm going to actually do a combination. So we're in October, Halloween is coming up, and also the 30th anniversary of one of my favorite films, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now, I did discuss this movie a little bit in a previous video where I was playing through Castlevania, but in this video, I'm going to be discussing that movie specifically, and a couple different things, my personal attachment to it, and also I want to talk a little bit about the workprint, because I watched it again recently, and it doesn't have an official release, but there's a lot of cool things in it. I really, really think it's great, and I wish it would get like a proper remaster and like a maybe not a 4K treatment, but like a Blu-ray release. I'd love to get it, and I'd love even for Francis Ford Coppola maybe to come back and revisit this movie because he's done it with Godfather 3, he's done it with Apocalypse Now, and Bram Stoker's Dracula really is probably his last great film. Certainly, it's his last really successful movie, and it's probably I would say it might not be the last great vampire film. You could argue that Interview with the Vampire, which came out a couple years later, is a is also an excellent vampire movie, but certainly the last great Dracula movie. No other movie has attempted to adapt Bram Stoker's novel faithfully since this movie came out. Everything has always been kind of a derivative in some form. I mean, you had the last. I'm trying to think. The last adaptation we had that was a theatrical release was probably what Dario Argento made, and that really even wasn't a proper adaptation. It's really more of a remake of Horror of Dracula. So, without further ado, let's get started. Let's play the game. Okay. And believe it or not, Sony used to make video games long before they created overpriced systems with with very limited exclusive games. Yeah, they used to publish video games. They didn't program this, obviously. This company, I think it's called Psygnosis, was the developer. But right away, I mean, you can see that this game takes a lot of visual influence from the film, and even the music in some ways. This is kind of similar. It's a derivative. I don't maybe they didn't have the rights to fully emulate the the score, the film score by Wojciech Kilar, but nevertheless, it's got great atmosphere. And as you can see here in this demo, uh, they Jonathan Harker looks like Keanu Reeves. He even has the graying hair, although it's a little bit early for him to have it at this point in the story, but he has it the whole game. So okay, so let's actually start playing. So this movie came out, this game came out in '93, but the movie came out in 1992, and I remember as a kid seeing previews for it and really wanting to see it. Not realizing it's a hard R rating. It's definitely not for children. And going forward, if you have children, you probably don't want them watching my playthrough of this. Not because of the content in the game itself, but we're talking about an R-rated movie, so let the kids save this video for another time, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, this movie came out in '92. I really wanted to see it. I did not get to see it until, at least not in its entirety, until probably 1999, 2000, and I was immediately hooked on it. I loved it. I did play this game a couple years before. I actually bought it from my cousin, who didn't think this game's very good. So he thought he was getting a steal. I paid $15 for it. Actually, my dad paid $15 for it. And I really like this game. It's not perfect. It's a little too easy in spots, and in other areas, it's a little bit unforgiving with its difficulty. The graphics, as you can tell, are pretty good. The music's pretty good. You might argue that the SNES version is superior with regards to both. It has certain little details that are different. Like, for example, you got that little life meter there. It actually starts off as the word beware, and then it morphs into the little health meter at the top. And then the music, obviously, SNES had a better sound chip. I mean, that goes without saying. So I saw this movie, immediately hooked on it, loved it. And at this point, I was already a Dracula fan. I was just really, really wanted to hunt this movie down, and I couldn't watch it. I couldn't rent it, obviously. So the first time I saw it was it was aired on TBS, and once I watched it, I'm like, oh, this is great. This is like my favorite movie ever. It's awesome, and I like loved Gary Oldman as Dracula. Like, he embodied the character, and he was strangely sympathetic, even though he's a mass murderer, and he condemns people to this horrible fate of drinking blood. Yet you feel sorry for him because he lost his love, and he's angry at God, and there's a lot of interesting theological uh, I guess elements, themes, if you want to call it that, that permeate the film in a way that most Dracula adaptations kind of shy away from. The Hammer films, they're probably the most uh, explicitly Christian uh, Dracula, vampire films, thematically speaking. This movie is also very much in that vein. Some of its, I guess, some of its lore kind of flies in the face of Christianity, in that it has a character that's reincarnated, which obviously is not a part of Christian doctrine. But nevertheless, the idea of repentance, no matter how evil you are, if you go to Christ and you seek repentance, which at the end Dracula does, he realizes the error of his ways. He realizes that he's been following the wrong path. He's wanted revenge against God, and it was just, I don't know. I'm going off on a weird tangent, so I'll steer back into the other stuff. So yeah, I saw this movie 1999, somewhere around there, and I just said, okay, so this movie's not that bad. I see it, and I was like, there's not really anything too objectionable in this. So maybe a year or two later, I'm at my friend Russell's house, and we decide we're going to rent it. And of course, the scene where, that's actually coincidentally, we're in this scene right now in the game. Harker is lured to a bed where he is, we'll say, seduced by three vampire women. Man, I'm not doing great here. Three vampire women, and they are very naked. And of course, in the TBS version, they have clothes on. And as soon as they came up, and the first one was like topless, like, rewind, hurry, or fast forward, hurry, get through this. So we were like, because we felt bad, because this isn't what we came here for. So, yeah, that was a big shock. But I rented it several times since then, not for that reason, because I really love Dracula, and I had a huge crush on Winona Ryder. And I still love this movie. But so having talked about that, let's discuss the work print a little bit. So the work print is, I'm not sure how much what the difference in runtime is. There are several scenes that are not yet in the work print that made it into the final cut of the film, and we'll get to that in a moment. But there's also a lot of stuff in the work print that is not in the final cut. The intro, notably, is a little bit longer. And it's different. There's some text, and Anthony Hopkins' narration talks over the text, and it's giving a little bit more background about Vlad Dracula and the Order of the Dragon and their role in the Crusades against the Ottoman Turks. And Interestingly enough, the Romanian pronunciation of Dracula is Dracula, and it's spelled that way in the intro. But Anthony Hopkins, he reads it as Dracula, and in the final cut, he says it correctly. He says it as Dracula, but it's a notable little uh, quirk of the work print. There's a lot of in the beginning. There is certain, I guess you could say, like, I guess they'd be animatics, not necessarily. Um, what's the word? Storyboards describing the opening battle. So that stuff wasn't finished. You don't have Wojciech Kilar's score in the film. It's all temp track music. Although some of the temp track music, if I'm not mistaken, I think it is Wojciech Kilar. It's just not from the movie. Um, if you've ever watched the trailer for this film, a lot of that music appears in the work print. But when Dracula returns to find his wife is dead, that scene runs a little bit longer, and there's more dialogue, and it smash cuts to the title, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it's like against a black screen, and I think the text might be green, like the font, the opening, because it has opening credits, unlike the final cut. There's no opening credits in the final cut. And yeah, I think the text is green. It's hard to tell because the work print has really bad quality. And I think it's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, so a lot of tracking issues. That's hence why I was saying that it needs a proper remaster for posterity, and just so we can enjoy it. I'm trying to think what else. There's a lot of narration, additional narration, alternate narration that appears in the movie. Stuff from Mina. Certain stuff like I think the whole scene where she's browsing through that copy of Arabian Nights that has some erotic artwork. It's there, but you never actually see. You have that conversation, but there's narration over top of it, so you don't know what's actually going on if you haven't seen the final cut. And it explains Mina and Lucy, their friendship, how they've been together, they've known each other for ages, and why Mina's staying there. I'm trying to think of what else. I think that when Harker is picked up by by Dracula's carriage, which is secretly being driven by Dracula, this is a little this is a little surprising. Maybe not shocking, but it is surprising because in the book, the carriage driver does speak. In the final cut, he never speaks. He just you hear kind of a low growl, and that's it. But during the carriage drive, there's kind of you're seeing inside the carriage, and an arm with a flask of brandy is offered to Harker, and there's a voice. I think he mentions plum brandy. I don't think it's Gary Oldman's voice. It's probably just somebody like a stagehand. My guess is that they probably would have put Gary Oldman's voice in post production. It isn't there in this particular scene. So it's a funny little detail. I'm glad it didn't make it into the movie because the way it's shot looks kind of awkward, and I prefer that the carriage driver you never hear him speak. It makes it more mysterious. Harker's arrival at Castle Dracula. They don't have the exterior shot of the castle finished yet. I think it's just a storyboard artwork. It's a placeholder. But one of the deleted scenes that you might find on the home release, where Harker is is invited in by Dracula, and they're walking up a staircase, and Dracula goes off screen to the left, and then he appears right behind Harker again, coming up the stairs right behind him. That that is in this work print. Again, I'm glad that they didn't include this either, because the effect doesn't look good because it's rear projection, and it's very glaring. I think on the work print itself it doesn't look quite as bad, but I think that might just be because the picture quality sort of obscures the fact that it's more of a it just doesn't look good. But it's okay because the quality of the work print doesn't really draw attention to it. What else is there? So the scene where Harker is shaving and Dracula sees the cross on his neck, and they have kind of a brief confrontation. The whole thing. I've seen many things already. Bloody wolves chasing me through some blue inferno. Like that whole thing. That scene is truncated. It happens, but the confrontation doesn't take place. It cuts around it. There's the wolf howling, and then Dracula says, "Listen to them, children of the night," all that, and then he leaves. It's very strange, and I think in this case it actually works better. I will say this: the work print, I think I think it's a better showcase of Keanu Reeves in that role. I think it cuts out some of his more weaker moments, and also there's more narration from Harker. In some cases, particularly towards the end, where Van Helsing is narrating, Harker does the narration instead, and I think it actually works pretty well. I think some of the delivery of the lines, I think some of it, the reason that his accent feels a little forced and kind of clunky, I think a lot of it was ADR'd, done in post production. He just did his lines over again when he wasn't actually on the set, and that's part of the problem. Maybe he just, at that point in his career, he wasn't yet accustomed to doing that kind of work, especially playing a character with an accent that is not native to him. And I think he delivers it much more naturally. It doesn't feel as forced in the work print. Just to be clear, I normally don't suck at this game this bad. No pun intended. What else is there of note? Oh, wait, I forgot. There is something in the beginning, and this is actually in the trailer. So after the whole thing with the origin of Dracula in the opening credits, it starts off in this library, and Van Helsing opens this book titled Vampire. He's saying, here is the shocking history of Prince Dracula. And some of that scene is used in the movie, and some of it's used in the trailer, some of the dialogue. And it's a cool little alternate introduction to Van Helsing, who the whole thing where he arrives at the Hillingham estate, and it's kind of a shot that resembles The Exorcist. That's not in this movie, or in the work print, I should say. He's there. The scene with them walking in on Lucy with being assaulted by Dracula's shadow, not in the movie, not in the work print. It's I'm guessing maybe they were reshoots, or they just hadn't gotten around to including it in this particular work print. To my knowledge, there is only one work print. There might be more than one, but I've never heard anything to the contrary. What else is there? Note. I had something. Oh, okay. When the heroes go to Carfax, that scene runs longer. where they're trying to sterilize Dracula's earth boxes. He it goes longer. There's stuff with there's like a bunch of rats that are inside the boxes and in the territory, the estate itself. So I think it's Arthur. He has a dog whistle, and a bunch of dogs come in to kill the rats. I think that might be it. It's just slightly extended. Um, what else? Um, Towards the end, um, we we don't get Van Helsing going off to. Well, we don't see him find the crypt with Dracula's brides. It just shows him walking out all bloodied with the three severed heads and throwing them off the ledge, which, if I remember right, is another storyboard. They didn't have the effect yet. And then, of course, the ending. If you've watched the deleted scenes or alternate scenes, the Dracula's demise is slightly different. He does not get decapitated. He just has his Mina just stabs him through the heart, and after that she goes back to Harker. She hugs him, and then they carry Quincy's body through the castle. And this is an interesting shot, and I actually really like. Sorry, I bumped my mic. This is something I kind of wish that they had kept in the final film. This extended ending, because there is an earlier shot. It's kind of an overhead of Dracula leading Harker across this room, and on the floor tiling there is a cross that's cross design on the floor, and it's sort of faded and it's notably inverted. They have this shot later at the end of the alternate ending where they're carrying Quincy's body across the castle, and the cross is in its proper position. It's upright, and you can see it prominently. And it sort of ties into the idea that Dracula and his castle, they have kind of odd physics, and it sort of seems to represent who he is. So with the cross being restored to its proper position and it's visible, it's sort of symbolizing his reconciliation with Christ. So I think it's an interesting little detail. And I feel like that ending doesn't quite make you feel so bummed out. That's one thing with the final cut. I do feel like I watched it and I'm like, oh man, like I just feel kind of sad after after I watched this movie. I love it so much, I really do, but it's just sad, and because it's like I mean, maybe it comes down to interpretation, but it's like she has to let him die. He's reconciled to God, but at the same time, they can't be together. But then maybe there's the interpretation that they are together, because she looks up at the end at the I don't know, what would be considered a mural on the ceiling where Elizabeta and Dracula are embracing, and they're kind of in the heavens. So maybe Mina isn't necessarily purely a reincarnation, but rather she is carrying Elizabeta, her spirit, in her. And in setting Dracula free, Elizabeta is allowed to go with him, and Mina is allowed to live her own life and love Jonathan. I don't know. That's my interpretation. That makes me feel a little bit better about the ending. Let's talk a little bit about the I guess you could say the multimedia tie-ins of this film. So, as mentioned before, Sony was responsible for publishing the game adaptations. And they, to the credit of the game designers here, they were quite creative. Now, the 8-bit and 16-bit adaptations of this game, I would say that they're the best ones. Um, they're platformers, hack and slash. The NES, I should say, NES version, I would argue, is probably the best, although it is very unforgiving at times when it comes to its difficulty. This one is a little bit more forgiving. Visually, I think it's the best, and so yeah, so these are hack and slash platformers. There was one for the Sega CD, and it is a beat 'em up, and it's very very like it's awful. It's not good at all. It does implement clips from the movie in really grainy, poor quality, and it has some voice acting, which is not great. And I think there's a variation for that on the Amiga, where it's not there's not as much like 3D there aren't any 3D backgrounds like the Sega CD. Sega CD version, I will say this, it is technically impressive for what it is, but the gameplay is just hot garbage. It's just not fun at all. And to be perfectly honest, there shouldn't be a beat 'em up for Dracula of all things. Strangely enough, it would not be the last time that somebody has attempted that, because Nosferatu for the SNES is a Dracula beat 'em up. That one is a little bit better. Still has its problems though. Anyway, I digress. So the Amiga version is similar to the Sega CD, but doesn't have the 3D backgrounds, and I think you can actually have some sort of weaponry in it. I think the difficulty is a little bit more balanced. And then for, I believe it's the PC, they have a first-person shooter, and it looks really bad. I've never played it, but it doesn't look good. It looks, again, the difficulty doesn't look balanced. It looks incredibly boring, and I just don't know how you would make that into a first-person shooter. But like I said, to their credit, they at least were trying different things with this license and not just kind of letting everything be a cookie cutter adaptation. So kudos to them for trying new things and being thinking outside the box. Man, why am I'm just doing awful today? I guess maybe because I normally don't narrate or whatever while I'm playing this. I'd also heard that there was man. I also heard that there was a tabletop RPG tie-in. I don't know exactly how connected it is to the movie itself, but I would be interested in looking at it. Man, this is killing me. I think I only have 2 continues too, so I need to be extra careful now. No joking around. Probably my biggest peeve with this game, I almost said film, with this game is that the the bosses. The bosses they're well designed, like visually. They look like Gary Oldman. They look like Tom Waits. They look like Sadie Frost. They're too big. like in relation to Harker's sprite, and they're too easy. They're way too easy. This last boss, assuming I get to him, um, he's just way too easy. And I normally don't do this bad at this game. This is usually a breeze. Come on. Yeah, that's the biggest problem for me with this game. I think is this that the bosses are way too easy. And I would say I think that dare I risk getting that extra life? Hmm. Do I want to try it? Oh, I lost. Okay. Oh well. Uh, well, I thought I'd do better than that. Okay, so we're gonna try and blast through this. Yeah, yeah. The last boss, too easy, and not that. I think maybe that's part of the problem with the difficulty imbalance here. Is like as you could see, that last boss, they just kind of chuck a bunch of really like a whole bunch of enemies that take way too many hits to take out, and the bosses themselves are not all that challenging. So, and another, and this is more of a nitpick, I guess. Your weapons, with some exception. So, okay, I'll show you an example here. Hang on. All right, I just threw it. I just threw. There's no throwing animation for the secondary weapon, and it just looks kind of lazy. So, which is a shame because this game is beautifully designed. I mean, if you look, I mean, look at the details. There's a scrolling background, like outside the window. As I mentioned, the sprites look really good. I even love this little arc of the sword, which is cool. I once heard that this little sword arc is someone someone compared it to the game Strider, which I had never heard of Strider prior to that, and I had to check it out. And of course, once I did, I was like, oh wow, Strider, this game's amazing. Maybe one day I'll play that game because it's super fun. So, Dracula, the carriage driver. It's pretty cool. It's funny because in the manual, he's referred to as Blue Dracula and his mighty whip. It's like, yeah. Some critics unfairly compare this game to Castlevania, and I don't think that. Well, like I said, that's not. I don't think it's fair. It's not like Castlevania. I mean, the gameplay is not really anything like. It's much more. I mean, if you were to compare it to Castlevania, I guess it'd be more kind of like Symphony of the Night, where it's more non-linear. I mean, there's levels. Symphony of the Night doesn't have levels, but it's not. I mean, you're going vertical as well as horizontal throughout the levels, and the physics are a little bit more relaxed. Um, it's not as like with Castlevania. You know, if you jump in one direction, you're committed to that direction. You can't jump. You can't change direction in midair, and at least not in the early games. So to give you a little bit more context of my level of fandom for this film, I have I own the movie, I own this game, and the SNES, or excuse me, the NES version of this game. I have the published screenplay, and I have the novelization, which I'm currently rereading again for maybe the second or third time. Um, and I feel like, do I have something? I have the soundtrack. I have the score for this as well. And this lucky guy is going to go see it on the big screen for its 30th anniversary next Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm super, super stoked. No pun intended. Uh, oh gosh, it's just, I'm so excited. Bram Stoker's Dracula is one of my six favorite movies. And of those six favorite movies, it's the first one. It was the first one to make it to the list, and it is not it has not left it is. I've had many favorite films, and this is the only one that has not left the list thus far. I do wonder, you got that dragon there. I don't know if that was intentionally meant to connect to the Order of the Dragon. It does feel a little bit out of place with the rest of the game, considering that they seem to have an interest in having some sort of visual continuity with the film. I did just have the thought maybe that's supposed to be Dracula transforming into a dragon, but I'm going to reverse that when I realize that no, you do fight Dracula in this level. Oh, that reminds me. Actually, now that I think about it, another scene from the workprint, and I think this is much better. The the scene in the workprint where Harker is seduced by the three brides, that scene plays out much more differently. It's shorter, it's less erotic, and it's a lot more nightmarish. Like, there's not as much time spent on like the sexual aspect of it. It's more like they're coming up out from under the sheets and like they're biting on him, and you don't have the music playing. I don't think there's any music playing over that scene, and I like it more. It's much more scary. I will say this: one of my criticisms of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the film, is that I do think that it leans a little bit too much on the eroticism and the romantic edition than it does on the horror. It doesn't really feel like a scary movie. There's parts in it that are certainly horrific, but it doesn't feel like a scary movie. Another scene, and I'm not sure if this is in the work print or not, but yeah, I think it is. So Harker's investigating the castle while Dracula's servants, what they would call gypsies at that time. I know, obviously, we call them the Romani now, but they're they're digging soil from deep within the castle, and Harker stumbles upon Dracula's tomb, and he attempts to harm him, but then Dracula wakes up, scares him, and then the brides show up and take him away. I really wish that had been left in the film. I think it's cool. Hmm. What else here? I'm trying to think. Oh, there's an interesting effects shot that um, that differs in the work print. So after Dracula gives his blood baptism of Mina, and they show Carfax in ruins and just like burning to the ground, and there's an old photograph of Mina and then they show as it's transitioning to another scene, you're seeing Dracula's face kind of hovering over it, and I think it's a composite shot, like a double exposure. That they do that effect, but they don't do it in that shot in the work print. They actually do it in the following scene where Mina's on the train. She's weak and she falls asleep, or she's being hypnotized. That's when they put that hovering shot of Dracula's face, and I thought that was an interesting change. I'm not sure how they accomplished that effect. I think it's double exposure, but it's the very same. Yeah, I don't know. I would love. I would really love for Roman Coppola to do visual effects on another horror film in that style. Um, that is one thing that is unique about this film, in that they deliberately used old uh, filmmaking techniques to do visual effects, because it's Coppola thought, okay, well, Dracula came out around the time that film was first starting to take off as a form of entertainment. So a lot of it was trick photography and using magic tricks, as it were, to accomplish um, special effects. So Coppola hired his son, who knew how to do that kind of stuff, and well, the film speaks for itself. I mean, I think the visuals are fantastic. They in some ways they look kind of they do draw attention to themselves, in that it's clearly like old. Like, once you know, for example, that there's a a prop um, house in the background that they're just using forced perspective to make it look larger than it actually is. It You can tell, but there's something about that, because it's relying on these old forms of visual trickery. It doesn't date itself because it's already dated to begin with, and that's what makes it fun. It gives the film a timeless quality, and I think that's one of many reasons why I find it such a delight to watch. Come on, I gotta beat it this time. Something funny that I have noticed in this game is that they use a mountain background frequently in the levels, including in places where there would not be mountains. So in some of the levels in England, for example, they're nowhere near a mountain range. I mean, it's in London and in Whitby. To my knowledge, there are no mountains in Whitby. It's by the water. So, see, look at that, Dracula with his hippie glasses and his long hair. But look at how easy this boss is. I mean, he's tossing a knife for some reason, and he's moving fast like the Flash. It's a weird. Yeah, I don't get it. It's too easy. The difficulty is not in the place that it should be. Those zombies, they take way too many hits, and so do those knights. But I think if you didn't have that, the game would probably be too much of a breeze to get through. But look at this. Look at how beautiful this is. I mean, it looks like the movie. It looks like Hillingham Estate. I do wonder how much um, the team for this game, how much access they had to video or photographs of the film to use as influence. I mean, Francis Ford Coppola and Roman Coppola and Fred Fuchs, who they all, to my knowledge, I think they all work for American Zoetrope, which produced this film. Um,
they're listed in the credits. So I'm guessing they must have had some level of involvement in this on I don't know what, but it is strange to me that they are credited. So they yeah, I don't know. It's funny these ghosts. I'm pretty sure it's the same sprite as the killer nuns, um, but they have a stabbing animation, which they don't have in the convent. That's an interesting choice of enemy in this game is the killer nuns, considering that the nuns are the ones that rescue Harker in the film and in the novel which this movie is based. This is the only part of the game here. Well, maybe one other level. This does not particularly look like the movie. It almost looks like something out of Sleepy Hollow, which coincidentally Francis Ford Coppola was executive producer on, but would not come out for oh gosh, that came out in '99. So a little bit of layman critic trivia. That's the first R-rated film I ever saw in a movie in a cinema. Sleepy Hollow, good stuff. Yeah, it feels very Tim Burton. Now there's somebody who should be making a Dracula movie, or maybe at one time. I don't know now. He's kind of lost his touch, in my opinion. Maybe around the time of Sleepy Hollow, he could have made a Dracula movie, but now I think he's no, not so good. Okay, so yeah, just the patterns for these bosses. It's just very simplistic, and I don't care for it. And they throw like a random projectile, which I don't. Again, I don't get. I'm not even sure what she's throwing here. What is this? Knife? I can't tell. There's some scenes from the theatrical trailer that I wish would show up. I wish they were deleted scenes, like on the DVD, and unfortunately they never show up on the work print either. There's an alternate shot of Dracula visiting Lucy. I'm guessing it's just before he arrives to kill her. And ordinarily in the work print and in the final cut, he appears as an old man. In the trailer, there's a shot where he's at the window. He's still a young man, but he has kind of that form where he looked like he's starting to turn into a bat. Like he's got the nose where it's just like the nostrils and more like demonic appearance. And then he kind of slams his hand against the glass. And I guess I'm making the connection with the final cut because he does something similar, except he doesn't slam the glass. He just kind of throws his arms out and uses a telekinetic throw to um, dispatch Arthur and make Lucy without any sort of protection. All right, come on. So apparently, this film has close to 40 different cuts that are out there. I have not seen all of them, just to be clear. Um, one of them, which makes no sense to me, and I must be purely for economy of runtime for television, for allowing for commercials and things like that. But there is a cut of this movie for television where Renfield is not in the film at all. Now he's an integral part of the story, and somehow they managed to cut around him. And I have no, I don't know what the motivation. Again, probably just for time, but I hate it. Like, it's Bram Stoker's Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula. It means it needs to have all the principal characters, all the important characters. Now, granted, it doesn't have every character. For example, Swales isn't in the in this film. I mean, he's not a principal character, but uh, and Lucy's mother is not in the film either, and they're kind of notable minor characters, but yeah, they don't show up. But yeah, I mean, you cut out Renfield. That's yeah. So okay, so here's the other level I was talking about. I mentioned that doesn't quite fit in with the rest of the movie. We're dealing with the asylum. I don't know. I don't know where this is. It doesn't look like any place in the movie, and it's outside where it's got snowy mountains. It looks like it should be later, like towards the end of the film, the end of the story. But you're facing off against Renfield here. I don't know. It feels like maybe this was meant to be after the after Carfax, but for whatever reason, it's here. And it just occurred to me, you got these boxes here. I wonder if these are supposed to be like the boxes of soil, Dracula's soil. But let me talk about the NES version for a little bit. As I mentioned before, NES version is actually my favorite, but it is very hard. I don't know that I've ever beaten it without save state. There are points in the game where you have to dodge a certain character and you can't harm them. Like they don't take any damage. And there's a part where you have to dodge Renfield, and you're towards the end of the game. It's a Carfax Abbey, and the pattern is I can never figure it out. It's so late in the game. It's like it's hard. It's hard to it's hard to memorize the pattern because once you die, then you have to go. And you lose your continues. You got to go all the way through that again, and then you got to try and figure out. Okay, can I do this pattern? Can I figure it out? And then by that point, you lose again. So I love this bat. It's pretty cool. See again, mountain range in the background. Uh, I think the first time I beat this game was when I finally had a turbo controller because with the turbo controller, it's like you just crush the enemies because it's just you just hold that button down and this like right now you can probably hear me mashing the button on here right now. All right, here we are. I don't think I've had to continue yet, so we're gonna beat it this time. But going back to what I said, yeah. So the NES version, it's the most fun. Uh, has a lot of exploration to it, which is fun. Um, it's unlike this game. There's a night and day function. So if you're playing a level during the day, it will eventually, if you stick around long enough, if you're dawdling, it will turn to night, and enemies will crop up, and traps will emerge that won't normally be there, and it makes an extra challenge. Um, Again, the bosses, they're kind of easy. They're not nearly as easy as the ones in this. They offer some level of challenge, but they're still not super hard. The weapons, oh my gosh, the weapons in this are pretty cool, even if they don't have a proper animation for them. The weapons in the NES game, oh my gosh, some of them are really, really stupid. Like, so one of the primary weapons is a rock. A rock. You start off with a knife, which is pretty much useless. You can't even use it on bosses. You get a rock. Really, you couldn't use like it couldn't be like a dagger, a throwing knife. It couldn't have been a gun. You had to do a rock. And the best weapon is a three-way rock. There are torches, cool. There's an axe, cool. Both of those I like. And I kind of wish that they were in this game. But yeah, most of the arsenal in the NES game, it sucks. Oh, gosh, stuck to one life without a life again. Darn it! All right, let's see. Can I make it through this? Can I make it through this? Let's see. All right. Really not. This isn't my day, folks. Interesting bit of trivia, and I've only read this in one place, so I don't. I'm not entirely sure if it's even true. I take that back. I've read it in two places. So I have a book called the Vampire Encyclopedia, and I think it was published in the 90s. Let me see. I have a second edition of it. It's sitting to the left of me. And there is a section on Bram Stoker's Dracula. It might not be that section specifically, but it might be on Francis Ford Coppola or whatever. But there is this thing, so talking about a rumored sequel called Van Helsing's Chronicles was never filmed. So, supposedly, according to this, there was talk about doing a sequel following Van Helsing. The only other time I've heard anything remotely similar to this was the trivia section for the film Van Helsing, which has no connection to Bram Stoker's Dracula. But they were saying at one time that kind of the movie Van Helsing evolved from the idea of a sequel to Bram Stoker's Dracula. I don't know if that's true or not. I remember at the time when Van Helsing was in production, reading that in the trivia, I'm like, yes, we're gonna get a sequel to Bram Stoker's Dracula, and then Van Helsing came out, and it's not. Like I said, there's no connection, and it bummed me out because I really wanted a sequel at the time for this movie. But looking at it now, it makes no sense. I think having any sort of sequel to Dracula sort of undermines what the ending says, which is he's at peace. You can't like if you take a character that is at peace and you bring him back and he's evil, um, it destroys the I guess what the meaningfulness. I don't know that really quite flows right as a sentence, but yeah, it destroys sort of the I guess the impact of the ending, especially for this movie where it's very clear like he has repented, he has made peace with God, he's saved, he's redeemed. Okay, final boss here. So as you can tell, he's just running back and forth. He's in his armor. I'm going to sit right here and just wail away on him and probably not take much in the way of damage. And it's going to be easy. On the subject of sequels, however, this game does seem to make a point to uh, hint that Dracula is not dead. You'll see in a minute. There he is, an old man. As you strike to defeat Dracula, he reverts to his former aging self. Gazing upon the helpless figure, a fleeting moment of pity touches your soul. As if feeding off this emotion, he seems to grow in power, and in one final massive effort, his body dissolves to an incandescent mist. quickly blending with the shadows of the ancient courtyard. The ground around you starts to shake, and so you run for the rough track that leads back to civilization. A movement from above catches your eye, but is gone too quickly to see clearly. Further down the track, you stop to take one last look at the shadowed castle. And just to be clear, if you beat this on hard, the ending does not change. I went through the hassle of doing that, and I was kind of disappointed that. Still, I remember playing this as a kid and beating it. I'm like, okay, and then finding out at the end of the movie doesn't do that. Okay, here we go. Here's the one thing that definitely they took from Castlevania. You'll see in a minute. Castle crumbles. Not every, most Castlevania games end that way. And it's funny to me because again, that castle doesn't look anything like the one from the movie. But so there we go. We finally beat the game. I am sorry that I took so long to do that. Was I was a scrub today apparently. So I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you've never seen Bram Stoker's Dracula, I highly recommend it. It's my favorite Dracula film. I think it's the best adaptation. And as I said, it is very erotic. So if that's something that's not up your alley, you might want to consider watching it on like regular television where it's a little trimmed down, and it is gory too. So if you're squeamish, that might not be to your taste either. But great movie. I love it. I love it. I love it, and I can't wait to see it on the big screen. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and God bless.